Welcome to the Folktale Project. This is Dan Schulz. Today, we have our final Turkish fairy tale of the week. And, well, it's a fun one. It really is, despite some early indications otherwise. This is The Wizard-Dervish. A long time ago lived a Padishah who had no son. As he was taking a walk with his lala one day, they came to a well, near which they stopped to wish. A dervish suddenly appeared and cried, "All hail, my Padishah!" Upon which the latter made answer, "If you know that I am the Padishah, then can you tell me the cause of my sorrow?" The dervish drew an apple from his breast and said, "Your sorrow is that you have no son. Take this apple, eat half yourself, and give the other half to your wife. Then, in due time, you shall have a son. He shall belong to you till his 20th year afterwards. He is mine." With these words, he vanished. The Padishah went home to his palace and cut the apple, sharing it with his wife according to the instructions of the dervish. Some time later, as the wizard had promised, a little prince came to the palace, and the Padishah, in his great joy, ordered the happy event to be celebrated throughout his dominions. When the boy was 5 years old, a tutor was appointed to teach him reading and writing. In his 13th year, he began to take walks and go on journeys, and soon afterwards he took part in the hunting excursions also. When he was nearing his 20th year, his father began to think of finding him a wife. A suitable maiden being discovered, the young couple were betrothed, but on the very day of the wedding, when all the guests had assembled in readiness for the ceremony, the dervish came, and carried off the bridegroom to the foot of a mountain. With the words, "Remain in peace," he went away. In great fear, the young prince looked around him, but saw nothing more alarming than 3 doves, flying towards the river, on whose bank he was resting. As they alighted, they were transformed into 3 beautiful maidens, who entered the water to bathe. Presently, 2 of them came out, resumed their bird forms, and flew away. As the 3rd maiden left the water, she caught sight of the young prince. Much astonished at his presence, she inquired how he had come there. "A dervish carried me hither," he answered, whereupon the girl rejoined, "That dervish is my father. When he comes, he will take you by your hair, hang you on that tree, and flog you with a whip. 'Dost know?' he will ask, and to this question you must answer, 'I know not.'" Having given this advice, the girl, transforming herself into a white dove, flew quickly away. Presently, the young prince saw the dervish approaching with a whip in his hand. He hung the youth by his hair to a tree, flogged him soundly, and asked, "Dost know?" When the young prince answered, "I know not," the dervish went away. For 3 days in succession, the youth was beaten black and blue, but when the dervish had satisfied himself that his victim understood nothing at all, he set him free. When the youth was out walking one day, the dove came to him and said, "Take this bird and hide it. When my father asks which of the 3 maidens you desire, point to me. If, however, you do not recognize me, produce the bird and answer, 'I desire the maiden to whom this bird shall fly.'" Saying this, the dove flew away. The next day, the dervish brought with him 3 maidens, and asked the youth which of them pleased him best. The youth accordingly produced the bird and said that he desired her to whom the bird should fly. The bird was set free, and alighted on the maiden who had instructed him. She was given in marriage to the youth, but without the consent of her mother, who was a witch. While the youth and the maiden were walking together, they saw the mother coming after them. The maiden, giving the youth a knock, changed him into a large garden, and by another knock changed herself into a gardener. When the woman came up, she inquired, "Gardener, did not a maiden and a youth pass this way?" The gardener answered, "My red turnips are not yet ripe. They are still small." The witch retorted, "My dear gardener, I did not ask about your turnips, but about a youth and a maiden." But the gardener only replied, "I have set no spinach. It will not be up a month or two." Seeing she was not understood, the woman turned and went away. When the woman was no longer in sight, the gardener knocked the garden, which became a youth again, and knocked himself, which became a maiden once more. They now walked on. The woman, turning back and seeing them together, hastened to overtake them. The maiden also turned round and saw her mother, hurrying after them. Quickly, she gave the youth a knock, and turned him into an oven, knocked herself, and became a baker. The mother came up and asked, "Baker, have not a youth and maiden passed this way?" "The bread is not yet baked. I've just put it in. Come again in half an hour, and then you may have some," was the answer. At this the woman said, "I did not ask you for bread. I inquired whether a youth and a maiden had passed this way." The reply was as little to the point as before. "Wait a while. When the bread is ready, we will eat." When the woman saw that she was not understood, she went away again. As soon as the coast was clear, the baker knocked the oven, which became a youth, and knocked herself back into a maiden, and they pursued their way. Looking back once more, the woman saw the youth and the maiden. She now realized that the oven and the baker were the runaways in disguise, and hurried after them. Seeing that her mother was coming, the maiden knocked the youth and changed him into a pond. Herself she changed into a duck, swimming upon the water. When the woman arrived at the pond, she ran to and fro, seeking a place whence she could reach the opposite side. At length, seeing she could go no further, she turned round and went home again. The danger over, the duck struck the pond and changed it into the youth, and transformed herself into a maiden as before, upon which they resumed their journey. Wandering onward, they came at length to the birthplace of the youth, where they entered an inn. Then he said to the maiden, "Remain here, while I fetch a carriage to take you away." On the road, he encountered the dervish, who seized him, and transported him immediately to his father's palace, and set him down in the great hall where the wedding guests were still waiting. The prince looked around at them all, and rubbed his eyes. Had he been dreaming? "What can it all mean?" he said to himself. Meanwhile, the maiden at the inn, seeing that the youth returned not, said to herself, "The faithless one has forsaken me." Then she transformed herself into a dove and flew to the palace. Through an open window she entered the great hall and alighted on the prince's shoulder. "Faithless one," she said reproachfully, "to leave me alone at the inn whilst you are making merry here?" Saying this, she flew back immediately to the inn. When the youth realized that it was no dream, but fact, he took a carriage and returned without delay to the inn, put the maiden into the coach and took her to the palace. By this time, the first bride had grown tired of waiting for so eccentric a bridegroom and had gone home. So the prince married the dervish's daughter, and the wedding festivities lasted 40 days and 40 nights. And that is the Turkish tale of the Wizard-Dervish from 44 Turkish fairy tales. And here, it's, like I said, it's fun. It's a love story. Aside from the beating of the youth and, the giving a child while promising to take it on its 20th birthday, it's kind of a sweet story. This is Dan Scholes for the Folktale Project. Don't forget that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, Overcast, anywhere you like to get your podcasts. You can find us on Twitter at Folktale Project. You can find us on Auto Radio, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, anywhere you like to listen. And you can always head over to folktaleproject.com where you'll find a new story waiting for you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Next week, in honor of Halloween, I won't be visiting any place specific, but there will be 3 Halloween tales. As always, thank you so much for listening.